Dick is someone who has imagined a better world and has inspired us to find a way there. But let's be honest, Dick Beamish is a lot. Dick Beamish gets under your skin. Dick Beamish wants to bother you. Like a mostly enlightened black fly, he can seem to be everywhere. You hear him buzzing even when he's not there. It is, however, the secret of his success. You hear him, you feel him, and you know he won't leave you alone. Dick has been buzzing around the Adirondacks since the early 1970s. After a sojourn as an art critic in San Francisco, just think about that for a second, he came back here. Dick served as a publicist for the nascent and controversial Adirondack Park Agency. He moved to New York City as a publicist advocate for the National Audubon Society, even while running a prototype ecotourism business in Macaulay Pond. In the late 1990s, Dick returned to the region for good and worked first at the Adirondack Council and then again at Audubon. Nearly 30 years ago, after almost as many years talking about it, Dick brought all that experience to bear when he conceived, funded, financed, organized, wrote, and published the Adirondack Explorer. And thank God for Rachel Rice, who is here, who brought so much needed equanimity every step of the way and every day of that tenure. So Dick has never been easy. Good advocates rarely are. Dick, as you will see, is more engaging and funny, amusing than most. You will witness his boyish charm in a second. He'll probably get back at me. But he has that inner imp in his eye and his smile, and he's just a wonderful friend. Okay, I've now said the nice things about Dick. The Adirondack Explorer is, of course, a great success. Thanks to all of you in this room and many more donors, contributors, advisors, and friends. Well done, all of you. Well done, us. The Explorer, like black flies, is now part of the Adirondack ecology. And at a time when so many journals and other publications are struggling and many failing, what explains the Explorer's success? While it came out of the tradition of Maine Times and High Country News, for those of you old enough to have read those journals, the Explorer has always been more readable. While as a point of view, the Explorer is accessible to people across the spectrum of politics and environmental concerns. The Explorer articulates a worldview born of Dick's optimism that citizens and government can make intelligent decisions on land use for communities and residents based on good data and a well-informed citizenry. The Explorer exemplifies journalism as an organ for community cohesion and rational decision-making. Of course, journalism has always been about informing people. Where the Explorer has become something different was its efforts to do so around a changing role of nature as the region's extractive economy receded. It tracked changes for both the humans and the nature in the Adirondacks. In a fast-paced world, the Explorer's willingness to slow down, examine complexities and nuance, elevates local voices, encourages civility, diffuses rancorous debates. It offers journalism at its best, a civic commons for discussion and resolution. This choice of respect over rancor, nuance over sound bites, encapsulates the best traditions of journalism, and the Adirondacks are better off for that. As with all startups, Dick persevered through inadequate and uncertain funding, ever-changing personnel, the need to alter formats to meet consumer and advertiser demands. Dick responded with columns, articles, and an online almanac that serve of both daily news and timeless information about nature, about trails, about history, about the people of the park. One reads the Explorer to know both one's neighbors and the neighborhood. The Adirondacks are now much better off than they were 28 years ago. Politics have cooled, tourism economy has grown dramatically, visitors are spending more money, there's another 500,000 acres plus of protected land, and there are bike trails and rail trails. While, of course, there are other factors at play, the Explorer is definitely one of the reasons why. Dick, there's still mountains to climb, issues to take on, more wilderness still, better lakeshore protection. I can hear this in my brain. I've listened to this for 40 years, right? Better lakeshore protection, a ban on hilltop and steep slope development, new and better access to public lands, and of course, more bike trails. More jobs, more housing. Rest assured, Dick, there are more than enough issues to occupy us cranky old environmentalists. Thank you, Dick, for being the buzz we hear, the itch we scratch, for changing how we perceive, interpret, and use the park. And congratulations on being chosen to receive the Harold Hochschild Award in 2026.
Well, wow. Thank you, Kim, for the kind words. Thank you for the cruel words if he had gone the other way, but thank you for the kind words. And yeah, well, thank you, and for all you've done to protect and preserve the Adirondacks over the years, Kim, and you go way beyond the Adirondacks as far as your land protection goes, way beyond. I'd also like to thank the man for whom this award is named. Not only did Harold Hochschild establish this extraordinary museum and write a classic history of the region, he also chaired the Temporary Study Commission on the Future of the Adirondacks at a time when large-scale land developers posed a very real threat to the park. In 1970, after 2 years of intensive work, the commission reported to Governor Nelson Rockefeller. Chief among its many recommendations, the report called for the creation of a state-level Adirondack Park Agency to regulate development that could otherwise degrade the park. The report's cover letter from Chairman Hochschild conveyed a sense of urgency. If the Adirondacks are to be saved, he wrote, time is of the essence. The governor and legislature moved quickly, and the park agency was established. Having followed these events from afar, I migrated to the Adirondacks the following year and managed to talk the APA's chairman, Dick Lawrence, into hiring me as the agency's first communications director. At that point, the APA was completing its land use and development plan for the park's private land. My initial task was to help gain support for the plan statewide by meeting with news media and citizen groups from Niagara Falls to Long Island. We were hoping for enactment of the plan in the next legislative session. From the start, I was struck by how little was known about the Adirondack Park as a whole, both inside and outside the blue line, about its size and complexity and vulnerability. There was clearly a need for more and better information about this unique place, a realization that would eventually result in the Adirondack Explorer. The APA's pioneering land use plan became state law at a bill signing ceremony on May 22, 1973, when Governor Rockefeller proclaimed that, quote, the Adirondacks are saved forever. A bit of an overstatement, perhaps. But one thing for sure, the park would now be better protected than it had been. And speaking of protection, I'd like to recognize an old friend and colleague, Bob Glennon, sitting right here at our table. I'd like to thank him for his decisive action at a critical moment. It was a time when the agency faced fierce opposition, mostly from would-be developers, backed by local officials who resented the idea of anyone, especially an upstart government agency, telling them what they could or could not do with their land. Though Bob would later become the APA's executive director, his most memorable hour came when, as a young staff attorney, he saved our headquarters in Raybrook from obliteration. This was the same day the two of us had driven to Canton for an evening presentation about the park agency and its work, something we did regularly in those turbulent times. The meeting ran late, and it was close to midnight when Bob, having dropped me off at home, arrived back at our Raybrook headquarters to pick up some things for a meeting the next day in Albany. He parked behind the agency building, entered through the rear door, and walked into the main office to see someone standing at the far end of the room. The man was holding a can of gasoline, which he was about to pour all over. His next step was to light a match. The building was constructed of logs that were now old and very dry, and the whole thing would have burned down in no time. Bob, a former football player, acted instinctively. He tackled the fellow and floored him, then kneeled on his chest, grabbed the phone off an adjacent desk, and summoned the state police. Remember that, Bob? The troopers, who were headquartered next door, were soon on the scene. The aspiring arsonist was taken into custody, and the APA offices lived to see another day. We never knew what happened to the guy with the gas can, but we suspected that some of our more dedicated detractors were behind the arson attempt. Their intent was to give the impression to the outside world, especially to lawmakers in Albany, that a full-scale rebellion was underway in the Adirondacks. In the end, this and other efforts to, quote, abolish the APA, the wording often seen on bumper stickers in those days. Another one was, the APA, another word for tyranny. How well I remember that one. But these efforts were ultimately unsuccessful, and the APA is still there. In the late 1970s, I left my state job to start a lodging and guiding service I would call Adirondack Ski Tours, with Adirondack Canoe Tours soon to follow. It would be rewarding, I thought, to share our beloved Adirondacks with others, and also rewarding enough, I hoped, to make a living. The plan was to accommodate a dozen guests for a week at a time, which meant expanding my log cabin, logs again, on Macaulay Pond into a lodge. I hired 2 gung-ho guides and a great cook. She also sang and played the banjo. And I would promote this guiding/lodging service through press coverage, brochures, and mailing lists. Each day, we'd head off for an outdoor adventure, return to the lodge late afternoon, and following a hearty dinner, continue with our Adirondack exploring when an invited expert would hold forth on the natural or human history of the park. It was a week of total immersion in the Adirondacks, with an extra treat during our warm weather sessions, a midweek visit to the Adirondack, then called the Adirondack Museum, followed by a hike up Blue Mountain. All of which once again confirmed the need and appetite for more information about the Adirondacks. Another very happy result of this venture was the arrival of a ski touring guest named Rachel Rice, who was then employed in New York City's fashion industry. Rachel and I hit it off from the start, and the following summer, she switched from the world of fashion to the world of nature. She became a guide with Adirondack Canoe Tours. Not as unlikely as it may sound, since she'd once been a canoe counselor at a summer camp in Vermont. Not too long after that, Rachel agreed to become my wife and partner in the adventures that lay ahead. By the early 1990s, it was time to fish or cut bait on that publication idea I've been toying with for so long. Also aware of this need was Robert R. Worth, who I'd come to know through my conservation work. A seasonal resident of Keene Valley, he would become a close ally and sounding board in this undertaking. Bob was professionally involved in another kind of publishing, having founded a college textbook company in New York City, and he was also, for many years, board chairman of this same museum we're in tonight. We envisioned a tabloid-style newspaper that would cover the Adirondacks as never before. It would carry lots of photographs, maps, and drawings that would illustrate news reports, feature stories, and commentaries. Adirondack Explorer seemed like a good name for the publication. Now all we had to do was make it happen. The Explorer was set up as a nonprofit organization, enabling us to receive tax-deductible contributions. Rachel and I sold our place on Macaulay Pond and moved temporarily to Vermont, where my versatile wife landed a job back in the fashion world. This would help sustain us, while I worked at raising money and creating a sample issue so prospective donors could see what we had in mind. After considerable searching, we purchased a home for the Adirondack Explorer and for ourselves back in Saranac Lake. That was the Santanoni apartment building, a former TB sanatorium with 16 small, somewhat decrepit apartments, but whose old dining room would make a perfect editorial office. Rachel and I would live on the second floor directly over the office, which made my commute to work an easy one, 3 minutes regardless of weather conditions. After hiring a combination editor-designer and an office manager, we put together our first issue, had it printed in Albany, and mailed to 100,000 prospective subscribers. This inaugural issue pictured a young moose on the cover and was dated August 1998, just 28 years ago. Unbelievable as that is. The lead editorial explained what we were up to. The Adirondack Explorer, it declared, will cover the people and places, fauna and flora, woods and waters, outdoor recreation, and the forces shaping the park's future. The Explorer will carry a strong conservation message, but we will strive to be open-minded and fair, to explore all sides and all points of view, to provide a public forum for rational discussion and debate. It began as a monthly tabloid and soon evolved into a bi-monthly news magazine. But the basic ingredients were there from the start. That first issue included a story about the return of the moose, a feature about Nancy Bernstein, headlined Artist, Carpenter, Musician, Cartographer. Nancy being an amazing young woman who built her own house in the woods and whose maps have graced every issue of the Explorer since then. There are interviews with the, quote, Long Lake Eight, the 8 graduates of Long Lake High School who constituted the state's smallest senior class. There are book reviews and restaurant reviews, a humorous essay titled In Praise of the Low Peaks, and a commentary opposing jet skis by Bill McKibben, then an Adirondack resident who had become a global leader in the fight to curb climate change. A center spread captures the view from Goodnoe Mountain under the heading, Adirondack Fire Towers Get New Lease on Life. And there's an article about the state's purchase of nearly 15,000 acres of the Whitney Estate, in the current news again, an early start in the spectacular surge of land acquisitions and conservation easements in the years ahead. From the beginning, the Explorer has enjoyed a special advantage, that being the pool of skilled writers, photographers, and artists who are naturally attracted to the Adirondacks. The same applies to other professionals who have contributed to the Explorer's success, including Lynn Pitot, whose fundraising assistance has been invaluable from from the get-go, right over here, happily is with us tonight, and Betsy Dernberger. Our now retired advertising manager, who has generated a flow of ads that beautifully complement the magazine's editorial content, a rare feat in magazine life. That same, call it Adirondack advantage, let's call it that, also applies to that other crucial component of the Explorer's success, the talented and dedicated board of directors that has been providing guidance and support for nearly 30 years. Yet another force, I would say they deserve a big hand. Yet another force in our favor has been the Albany Times-Union newspaper. The TU's publisher, George Hurst, not only cares deeply about the Adirondacks and has a home on Lake George, he also serves on the Explorer's board of directors. Starting with that very first issue, many of our freelance contributors have been Times-Union reporters and columnists. The TU's former editor, Rex Smith, who is also an Explorer board member, has encouraged and supported us from our earliest planning days. And Phil Brown, also with us tonight, the TU's environmental reporter when I first met him, edited and shaped the Adirondack Explorer for almost 2 decades. Phil joined us during our second year of publication with the promise that he would, and I quote, take the Explorer to another level, which is exactly what he did for almost 2 decades. Though retired as editor, Phil continues to enliven our pages with accounts of his outdoor adventures. In the current issue, for example, he reports on bicycling end-to-end our splendid new Adirondack Rail Trail, a rail-to-trail conversion that runs 34 miles through wild and scenic country from Lake Placid to Tupper Lake. His companion on the ride was Joe Martens, who, as former Environmental Conservation Commissioner, was instrumental in securing state support for the project. Phil's story is also a reminder that it was the Explorer's editorials, guest commentaries, and an outpouring of letters from readers that helped launch the rail trail movement to begin with. It was a treat being out there bicycling on it today and thinking back over the 20 years that thing was gestating. When Phil stepped down as editor, Jim O'Dotto, a distinguished investigative reporter for the Albany Times-Union, took his place. And around that time, Tracy Ormsby, a senior editor at the TU, took over as Explorer publisher. And she took over from Tom Woodman, who had followed me brilliantly in that job. Under the stewardship of Tracy and her team, the Explorer is looking better than ever. Its increasing range and depth is reflected in the masthead, which now includes a water reporter, policy reporter, and community editor. The Explorer has also branched out into daily news coverage through its online Adirondack Almanac, highlighting current events, history, art, nature, and the park's conservation needs and opportunities. All in pursuit of the Explorer's stated mission, quote, to further the wise stewardship, public enjoyment, community vitality, and lasting protection of the Adirondack Park. It's been gratifying to see this dream become a reality, and an honor for the Explorer and myself to receive the HKH Award. Thank you all for your friendship and your support, for being here tonight, and for helping to secure the future of this very special part of the world. Thank you.